The wooden spoon hit the kitchen floor before I even felt the pain. For one full second, the only sound in the room was my own breathing. Then I looked up. My son was standing 3 feet away with his chest rising fast and his eyes holding something I had never seen in 68 years of knowing his face. Not regret. Not shock. Something worse than either. Satisfaction. He looked at me the way a man looks when he has crossed a line he has been thinking about crossing for a long time and finds that it was easier than he expected. Then he smiled and said the words I will carry for the rest of my life. Maybe now you'll learn to stop pushing back. I pressed my hand to my cheek. I looked at my son, the boy I had held through fevers and nightmares, and one thought settled through me like cold water. If he could do this in my kitchen, what else had he already decided he was capable of? I didn't cry. I picked up the spoon, set it on the counter, and sat down at my kitchen table. Not thinking about what had just happened. Thinking about what I was going to do next. My name is Ruth Calloway. I am 68 years old. A widow, a mother, a grandmother. And the next morning I woke before sunrise, tied on my apron and began to cook. Fried chicken until golden. Biscuits soft enough to come apart at a touch. Creamed corn the way my husband Thomas used to ask for. Mashed potatoes, green beans, peach cobbler. The whole house smelled like something worth coming home to. I cooked like I was feeding people I loved. Just not the people Daniel expected. When he came downstairs at noon, he looked at the table spread with food and leaned in the doorway like a man who had already won. Well, he said. He finally learned. Then he looked toward the head of the table. The chair that should have been empty was not empty. A man sat there with his hands folded and his eyes fixed on Daniel with the stillness of someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment. Daniel took one step back. His voice dropped to something thin. What is he doing here? I stood behind my son and said quietly, "Sit down, Daniel. We need to talk about what you did last night." That was the moment everything that had been building for 3 years finally broke open. But to understand why that chair mattered, you need to go back. Thomas Calloway died 4 years ago on a Tuesday in November. He had been a carpenter, a steady man, the kind who fixed problems without making them a performance. We had been married 41 years. Our son Daniel was 39 when his father died. He had Thomas's hands and, I believed, a version of Thomas's character. I was wrong about that. But grief distorts perception, and in those first months I was seeing everything through a filter of loss. Daniel changed after the funeral. Fully. Not in a way I could have pointed at. He came by more often. Help with groceries. Said his dad would want him to take care of me. I believed him. That was love doing what love does. Extending trust to people who have earned it. The problem was Daniel had decided my trust was a resource rather than a gift. 8 months after the funeral, he said he and his wife Carla were struggling financially. They needed a place to stay for a few months. I said yes before he finished the sentence. Of course I did. For the first few months, having them felt almost right. Their older boy Owen did homework at my kitchen counter. Their daughter Jessie laughed at cartoons in the den. Carla thanked me for meals. Daniel fixed things around the house. Felt like family. Then it stopped feeling like that. Carla began making comments about the house. Curtains outdated. Kitchen heavy. Photographs on the table making the rooms feel sad. I told myself she meant well. I stayed quiet. That was the first long mistake. Then came the questions about money. Thomas had left behind a modest insurance policy and savings we had built across 40 years of careful living. After Daniel helped me organize paperwork one afternoon, the questions started. How much do you still have? Have you thought about the house? Has anyone talked to you about transferring property now to make things simpler? I laughed the first few times. Then I stopped laughing. One evening I came down the hallway and heard Carla's voice in the kitchen. She thinks we're helping her. She'll come around. Daniel's voice lower, I know. I'm handling it. I stood in the hallway with my hand on the wall and understood something I had been refusing to understand for months. My son was not helping me navigate grief. He was managing me. There is a difference between those two things. The difference is everything. Then Daniel sold Thomas's tools. Thomas had a workshop behind the house. His tools hung on pegboards exactly where he had last placed them. I went in there when I missed him, stood in the smell of sawdust and old metal. I had told Daniel more than once it was not to be touched. The day I found tools missing, he was in the kitchen drinking juice. Where are your father's tools? I asked. He didn't look ashamed. I sold a few. We needed money for school clothes. Those belong to your father. And I'm his son, he said. Stop acting like I stole from a stranger. I cried in my bedroom that afternoon as quietly as I could. That night Owen knocked on my door. He was 11 and had heard yelling and looked at me with his father's eyes and asked if I was okay. That was the first night I allowed myself to consider what kind of home those children were growing up inside. My friend Gloria Simmons had known me for 32 years. She taught school for 3 decades and had the ability to look at a situation and name it accurately. I went to her house and tried to describe what had been happening. She listened for 8 minutes. Then she said, "You need to stop being afraid of your own child." Before I left, she handed me a small notepad. "Write things down," she said. "Dates, what was taken, what was said. You need truth on paper." I carried that notepad in my purse from that day forward. The pages filled faster than I expected. 2 weeks before that Sunday, I woke to voices downstairs. Daniel and Carla in the kitchen. "She signs the papers or I make her sign them," Daniel said. "I'm sick of living under her roof waiting for what's already going to be mine." I walked back to my bedroom and didn't sleep again that night. The next morning I moved my bank documents into a locked box in my closet. Changed my account password. Called the bank about protections. Asked Gloria for the name of a lawyer. I did all of this quietly. For the first time in a long time, my silence was not fear. It was preparation. Then came Friday night. It had rained since mid-afternoon. Carla had gone out. The children were upstairs. Daniel came into the kitchen with mud on his boots and beer on his breath and the coiled quality of a man who has wound himself tight all day. He asked about the locked box. I said I had moved personal papers. He moved closer to the stove. "Everything in this house concerns me. No, Daniel," I said. "You don't." That was the first time in months I had spoken to him without careful softness. Something shifted in his face. He had counted on that softness. He had built his entire plan around it. He grabbed my arms. "Hard. Let go," I said. He didn't. I pulled back. He lifted his hand. For 1 second I believed some last part of him would stop. Some memory. Me sitting beside his bed when he was sick, tying his shoes for his first day of kindergarten. None of it arrived in time. His hand came across my face. Flat. Then the wooden spoon hit the floor. Then just the heat of it in my cheek and my son standing there with satisfaction in his eyes. "Maybe now you'll learn to stop pushing back." He walked out. I stood alone by the cold stove and understood, with absolute clarity, that this had never been about grief or financial pressure. This was about a man who had decided the woman in front of him had no credible response left. He was wrong about that. That night I sat at my kitchen table with frozen peas against my cheek and called Gloria. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She said, "Come over." I looked toward the hallway where my grandchildren were sleeping and said, "Not yet. But tomorrow I need you to do something for me." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet kitchen and looked at Thomas's empty chair at the head of the table. I had kept that chair empty for 4 years out of grief. Tomorrow I decided it would not be empty. I went to bed with a bruised face and a completely clear mind. By the time I fell asleep, I knew exactly what I was going to cook. And I knew exactly who needed to be sitting in that chair. Sheriff Raymond Cole had known our family for the better part of 2 decades. He had gone to the same church as Thomas. He had eaten at my table twice before. He was not a stranger to my house. He was, in fact, the worst possible person Daniel could have found sitting at the head of his father's table. Because Raymond Cole knew exactly what kind of family we had been. Which meant he would understand precisely what had been done to it. He arrived that Saturday morning while Daniel and Carla were still sleeping. I let him in through the front door, sat him at the head of the table, poured him coffee and briefed him quietly for 20 minutes while the feast cooked around us. He listened completely without interruption with his hands folded and his eyes on my face. When I finished he said, "You photographed it." I had. He said, "And the notepad?" I set it on the table. He read through it carefully. Then he said, "All right. Let's see what your son does when he comes downstairs." Daniel came in at noon with the easy entitlement of a man who believed someone else's effort belonged to him by right. He looked at the food and smiled. Oh well. He finally learned. Then he looked at the head of the table. Raymond Cole looked back at him. The smile left Daniel's face so completely it was as if it had never been there. All the color followed it. "What is he doing here?" I said from behind him. "Sit down, Daniel. We need to talk about last night." Carla came in from the hallway and stopped the moment she saw the sheriff. Her hand went still at her ear. "Oh," she said softly. Owen and Jessie appeared behind her, wide-eyed and reading the room the way children do. Grandma, Owen said. Is everything okay? Not yet, sweetheart. But it's going to be. Sheriff Cole looked at the children with calm authority. He said, Owen, Jessie, would you help your grandma bring the biscuits and sweet tea to the table? They nodded quickly, grateful for something normal to do. Raymond Cole looked at Daniel for a long moment. Your mother called me last night. Daniel's jaw tightened. About what? About what happened in this kitchen. Carla turned sharply. What happened in the kitchen? Daniel said nothing. I answered for him. He hit me. Jessie dropped the serving spoon. It rang against the bowl. Nobody moved. Owen looked at his father with the expression of a child whose understanding of a person is rewriting itself in real time. Carla stared at Daniel with her lips parted. Daniel said it wasn't like that. Raymond said, then tell me what it was like. Daniel rubbed his hands together. We argued. She wouldn't listen. Raymond Cole nodded once. Words are not hands, he said. Frustration is not permission. Anger is not a defense for striking your 68-year-old mother in her own kitchen. Daniel tried. I barely touched her. Raymond said, your mother has a mark on her face. She photographed it. She also kept a written record going back several months. Daniel's eyes came to me, not with guilt, with calculation. You called the sheriff over a slap. Over a crime, I said. I sent Owen and Jessie to eat in the den. Waited until I heard the television. Then I turned back to the table and said the thing I had been carrying for months. This didn't start last night. Raymond watched me. Carla and Daniel watched me. Last night was the loudest thing. But it was not the first wrong thing in this house. I said everything. The tools. The mail. The papers pushed at me like I was a signature waiting to happen. The night in the hallway when I heard my son say the house was going to be his anyway. When I finished, the room was completely still. Raymond Cole looked at Daniel. He said, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Did you move items belonging to your mother out of this house without her permission? Daniel looked at the table. Carla looked at Daniel. And in the silence between those two looks I saw the first crack form in the wall they had built together. Then Daniel said something so quietly I almost missed it. There's a storage unit. The room went absolutely still. Carla's face turned white. A storage unit. Raymond Cole stood up. We're going to that unit. Today. Right now. The drive took 11 minutes. Daniel in the back seat. Nobody speaking. Raymond parked in front of Unit 117. Open it. Daniel got out slowly, walked to the unit the way a man walks somewhere he would rather not arrive. The door rattled upward. And there was. Not a few boxes. Not some tools. My life, organized and labeled and stacked on metal shelving in a rented space my son had been filling for months. Workshop. Records. Front hall. Mom's bedroom items. Christmas. Each label in his handwriting. Deliberate. Planned. My sewing machine in the corner. Thomas's red toolbox pushed against the back wall. My Christmas china in newspaper. The nursery rocking chair leaning sideways with a cracked leg. Framed photographs face down on the top shelf, dusty. I stepped inside slowly. Every step deeper was another disclosure. My recipe box. Thomas's Bible. The bedroom lamp. A carton labeled garage papers. Inside it, tax records, insurance documents, the property deed copies. And beneath those, Thomas's blue metal cash box. I asked Daniel if there had been money in it. He said I borrowed some. Raymond asked how much. Daniel said, enough to cover a few months. Those 3 words covered the months my grocery list had come back short, and Daniel had told me with genuine sounding concern that I should think about cutting back. I moved to the back corner of the unit where a green tackle box sat half hidden. I lifted the lid. Inside, on a folded piece of velvet, Thomas's watch. The one his father had given him. I pressed it to my chest and closed my eyes. Raymond looked into the box. He said quietly, is there something else? Under the watch, in its original case, Thomas's Navy service medal. His father had earned it. I looked at Daniel. He was looking at the floor. You would have sold it, I said. He said, maybe. Not I'm sorry. Not I couldn't. Maybe. Raymond photographed everything methodically. I found the letters at the bottom of the tackle box. A bundle tied with blue ribbon. Letters from Thomas from our early years, the ones I had believed lost in an attic water leak years ago. Daniel had taken those too. Not because they had value. Because in the process of stripping my house he had swept up everything and my love letters had simply been caught in the current. I set the bundle carefully beside the watch. Then I turned to Raymond. I said, yes. He looked at me. As he repeated. Yes, I said. I want to file the report. Daniel's voice cracked. Mom. I looked at him for a long time. The shelves around us held the physical record of every choice he had made. You hit me, I said. You took from me. You planned to take more. You did all of this while your children ate at my table and called me grandma. Yes, Daniel. I want to file the report. What I didn't plan for happened in the parking lot when we were leaving. Tires on gravel fast. A car stopped hard. Carla got out before the engine quieted. Owen behind her. Then Jessie still holding her stuffed animal. Carla's face was the color of old paper. There are men at the house, she said. 2 men in a truck. They were loading boxes from the garage when I went back for Owen's school things. They said they were there for a pickup. I looked at Daniel. He closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. That 1 second told me everything. Raymond was already moving. We drove back without speaking. When we turned onto my street, the truck was still in the driveway. The garage door open. Thomas's workbench visible under a tarp in the truck bed. Raymond stepped out hard. Step away from that truck right now. Both men turned. The taller one raised his hands. This is a misunderstanding. Raymond, step away. He walked toward them with the authority of a man who has never needed speed to communicate that he means what he says. He asked who hired them. The taller man said they got a call. The owner wanted the garage cleared. Raymond, I'm looking at the owner. She's standing right there. Both men looked at me. Then at Daniel. You said it was your house. Daniel said nothing. Raymond, unload everything you've touched. Right now. They did. I stood by the porch steps with Owen and Jessie and watched my husband's workbench come out of a stranger's truck and go back into the garage where it belonged. Owen held his sister's hand. He looked at the workbench and then at me. Did Grandpa build that? Yes, sweetheart. He thought about it. Then he said, Dad shouldn't have tried to take it. Yes, I said gently. He shouldn't. Jessie asked, is Daddy going to be in trouble? I said, some things have consequences. He thought about that. Like when I broke the vase and had to help clean up. Yes. A little like that. She nodded and leaned against my side. I put my arm around her and stood there watching the truth arrive at my house in broad daylight. The formal report was filed that afternoon. Assault. Unauthorized removal of property. Misappropriation of financial resources. The protective order was granted within the week. Seeing Daniel's name on a legal document that restricted his access to me did not feel like betrayal. It felt like oxygen. Carla took the children to her sister's house Sunday evening. She came to me in the kitchen before leaving without performance. She said I didn't know how far it had gone. I looked at her. Some of it you knew. Her chin trembled. Some of it, yes. When Owen came to say goodbye, he hugged me for a long time. Will you still be here? Yes. Even if we don't live here anymore? I'll always be here for you. That's different from the house. Jessie hugged me twice and left a drawing on my kitchen counter. 2 figures in front of a house. Across the bottom in her careful handwriting. Me and Grandma. It stayed on my refrigerator for a long time. Daniel's case moved through the system slowly. Formal charges, a restitution agreement, mandatory counseling, 2 years of probationary terms. I did not need dramatic punishment. I needed legal acknowledgement that what happened was real, that it had a name, that it had consequences. Those things arrived. They were enough. I changed the locks. Reinforced my bank security. Spent 2 weekends with my brother Frank returning everything from the storage unit to where it belonged. We fixed the rocking chair leg. Rehung the photographs. Rebuilt the shelving in Thomas's workshop. One afternoon while sorting the letters I found a note tucked inside the blue ribbon bundle. Thomas's handwriting, the slightly looser hand of his last years. Marty, he had written, he had called me Marty since the year we met. If you're reading this, I was probably organizing badly again. The note continued. You've always believed that love means carrying everyone until your back gives out. But a home doesn't get built by one person enduring forever. It gets built when everyone in it respects both the walls and the people inside them. Don't let anyone make you small in the place we built together. I sat down on the workshop stool and held that note until my eyes had finished with it. Then I folded it carefully and put it in the locked box in my closet. That note became my answer to every late-night doubt. Did I do too much? No. Did I fail my son? No. I failed myself for too long. Then I stopped. Months later, a letter arrived through Daniel's counselor. He had written that after Thomas died, he had started measuring himself against my life constantly. My stability. My ability to continue. He had felt like a failure in the face of my steadiness. Instead of facing that honestly, he had let it become resentment. Then entitlement. Then a plan. He wrote that hitting me was the moment he still saw when he closed his eyes. He wrote that Owen's face in that kitchen had broken something in him he did not know how to repair. I read it twice. Then I wrote back one paragraph. I said remorse without change is only performance. I said I hoped he was becoming someone his children could trust. I said forgiveness was not a door I could open for him from this side. Then I sealed the envelope and let it be enough. A year passed. The house changed slowly in the ways houses change when fear is removed. The rooms feel more present. The ordinary sounds reassemble into something that resembles comfort. Gloria repainted the dining room a warm cream she called the color of starting over. Owen helped me plant the spring garden and declared himself official assistant manager of the property. Jesse became chief flower officer, which satisfied everyone. There was an afternoon in the second spring when the light in the kitchen was doing something particular with the windows and the smell of coffee, and I stood at the counter and recognized something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, though that was part of it. Something quieter. Safety. My own house feeling like mine again. My son had stood in my doorway and believed that cooking him a feast meant I had accepted defeat. He was right that I had finally learned something. He was wrong about what it was. I had learned that silence has a cost. That patience practiced past its limit becomes a trap. That the people who mistake your love for weakness are counting on you to keep making that same mistake. And that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply set the table, sit down, and tell the truth in a room full of people who expected her to stay quiet forever. If this story reminded you of someone who carried too much alone for too long before they finally set it down, share it with them tonight. And if you find value in stories about quiet strength and what it costs and what it gives back, come back. Because there are more. And they are all still being lived.